I'm just trying to think. Do you think J.K. Rowling is like INFP?
Oh, I have no idea because I don't think I know that book so well. But I do think that I do remember this whole thing about like the jelly beans or whatever. Do you remember like there are some beans in this Harry Potter universe and they all taste different?
Oh yeah,
Okay, so they're called something else, but it's obviously like jelly bellies. And I'm thinking that's such an SI thing to do. Like always do that. I'm like, oh, one thing. Haha, immediately reminds me of something else.
I think in an interview she said that like she always knew from the very beginning like how the book would end, and someone was like, "Oh, that's very NI," which I agree with, but then I think actually it was more so that she always envisioned the final scene, which I think is more SI.
Wait, I think we can talk about the authors, I think, that we think are NE, or authors that think are NI.
So I think that Murakami that I like is probably NI.
Okay, based on this like one paragraph I think that you had me read of Murakami, I thought he was like definitely like NISE because okay, James Joyce I think is NISE and I think that's why I didn't like his books. I mean I saw that he was like a good writer, but I didn't personally like that as much as most other books. And like if I were to describe it, I would say that the NISE is more about building an atmosphere. They're descriptive, but it's because you're capturing the moment and the times and like just building this mood. Whereas Flaubert, I'm pretty sure he's like SINE, and he's also really descriptive. There's all these like descriptions that you think like, oh, it doesn't like why are you describing so many things? It's not to build an atmosphere. He's constantly building analogies, and each like word choice just makes sense because later on this sentence about this arbitrary thing will become a theme in that character's like character progression. So like he's constantly, so it'd be like analogy versus atmosphere, I would say, is like the difference.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay, I'm glad you have SI because like when you brought up this whole like which authors, I'm like, oh my god, I don't like remember any authors by any MBTI type. But yes, okay. No, I do remember in high school that James Joyce was like one of the authors I actually could interpret their stuff, and yes, it's probably because they're on the same NISE axes as me. And yeah, it was like all these like short stories, right? Where like every short story I think had this like one NI point that was conveyed through all these like SE kind of like happenings throughout the day. And
That's so funny. You're like, oh yeah, I get James Joyce's one NI points, but meanwhile, I was like kind of just struggling, not so struggling, but I kept seeing like idea associations, like I kept seeing motifs and thematic points throughout, not just one NI point, but several points. And I kept thinking, like, Calypso, he did not mean this. I can't see the one point, so I'm just gonna write this association. But the whole time I felt like I was lying because I'm like, no, there's no way he meant this. It was just a coincidence.
going back to Murakami, that's like an author that I really love. And yeah, I think we had this conversation earlier about like writing styles, and that's when I realized like, oh my gosh, that's why I like him. He's probably an NI user, maybe like INFJ or something. But there's a very NISE way that he builds up atmosphere, that like all of his descriptions are sort of very like ordinary descriptions, kind of everyday things, kind of more in an SE way, where I think SI would like takes out these specific details and as sort of like hints as like symbols or themes or something. And I don't think he does that. It's kind of just reads like ordinary happenings, but then somehow along the way of these ordinary happenings you realize that it's completely like surreal.
I think the general trend is that for the NISE author, when I'm reading it, it's like, okay, I have to read a paragraph or two paragraphs to get some sort of general satisfaction. But then with the SI person, a lot, like some of the, not that they're all good authors, but the best SINE or like any SI authors, you can read one sentence and it kind of like hits you like a rock, like a stone in your face. It's like, oh, that's just like such a strong sentence. I think in the piano teacher book, one of the lines was like, she came in thunderstorm, which is funny because I'm about to say that the line was like, he came into her life like a hurricane or something, or swept through her life like a hurricane. So I immediately like imagine this havoc and wreckage and like the flood. Yeah, so but just like a few words, right? Like less than 10 words.
Yeah, that's interesting. Something like that, I don't think it would have that sort of impact on me. I think I would need that specific kind of moment along with like other little details throughout the book to kind of build this picture of like what that character is like or what their relationship is like. Or so, yeah, just to kind of find these general patterns. But yeah, just to read one sentence and have all of these things evoked in my mind is like, it's not something I experience.
So because SE just experiences the detail, I always like associate the detail. So if there are too many details, I get like really exhausted and bored.
I think like SE writing just writes about things like just as they are in a very, I don't know, just in a descriptive sense. But SI like always makes like little analogies or like little symbols out of things. So I think if there's like writing where it's like every word or like every sentence is like a little puzzle that has to be like unraveled to see what the actual meaning is, and I just get so exhausted with that.
Yep, everything is a puzzle. It's true.